Hello, family. Welcome to the Pearls for Diamonds podcast, where we discuss and share our experiences and wisdom to encourage and support your courageous leadership where you live, learn, and earn. I am your host, Dr. Shelly, and today's episode continues our recognition and celebration of Hispanic Heritage Month. And I'm so excited to have my colleague who has become a very close friend and someone who I have an immense amount of respect and admiration for. He is the Chief of Human Resources and Labor Relations for Fresno Unified School District. And just y'all are going to see his love and heart for kids knows no bounds. He is relentless and steadfast in his dedication to achieving equitable outcomes for all adults in service to children. He's a husband, a father, and a warrior for doing what is right. And so I would love for the whole family room to please join me in welcoming David Chavez to the show. How are you, my friend?
I am very well. Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Shelley. That's going to be hard to live up to that.
You're awesome. And I appreciate working with you and that you just have a really unique perspective on what it is to work with people and develop people. And that's what I want to bring to the forefront. So let's go ahead and get started. And so if you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners, what's been your journey to where you are today and what has this meant to you and your family for you to be in the position that you're in?
Absolutely. Let me just start off by saying that I started my career outside of education and in private industry. And I did that while I was working in finance while going to school as I finished my degree. There was a
Mhm.
time in my life where that changed and I had a transition in careers, and that's when I started in education. First started by teaching some courses at community colleges as well as private universities, and then an opportunity came to come to Fresno Unified and serve the children of Fresno Unified. And that's where my journey started here. And my journey started as an analyst, actually. It was an entry level management position, doing some work where I was working with the career education department to help students um, achieve different experiences that they weren't achieving before in order to give them exposure to things that in an urban district such as ours, some kids don't even leave their neighborhood, much less be able to experience something like a winter camp or summer camp or even see the beach. Simple things of that nature that we take for granted sometimes. And started my journey with that and then moved into the role of um, serving under the CFO for a couple of years, and then into the chief of staff role where I spent most of my time with Fresno Unified, serving as a chief of staff under the superintendent and supporting the board of education, and that was for about 7 years. And then now I'm here with the human resources department, and it's been just such a pleasure and a humbling experience, and super excited. You asked how that has impacted me and my family. I say that the being in this role has changed me more than I have been able to change the system, and I'm super blessed and grateful for that.
I love how you brought that in because, coming from teacher to, uh, well, from our private industry to teacher to really then starting at the analyst level on the classified side of management, and then still moving up and being able to be that right hand person for the superintendent. It's what many would consider a non-traditional, trajectory, but it works for who you are and your skill set and what you bring to the table. And I think that's awesome for folks to realize that you don't have to have this traditional trajectory to be impactful. You are very impactful and very um, recognized as a valuable asset, despite, and I say that despite with air quotes, not having that traditional trajectory. And you still, I would have never known that you came from private industry had you not told me, because you have this heart and this love for kids and children and learning and what's happening that is just at the core of who you are. And so I just want to thank you for kind of illuminating that for us, because as our listeners are all kind of processing, like, where do I fit? How is I might not be, I don't want to be a teacher, or maybe I do want a teacher, or I'm in the finance world, I'm in the HR world. I mean, I don't want to necessarily follow that traditional trajectory, and you are a clear example of how that's awesome. and possible.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that, right? It's been actually such a an invaluable thing coming from private and doing what you just said,
Mm,
and having the ability to continue down that path. Because when I sit in rooms of new hire employees during an orientation or something, and I tell them that story, their eyes light up because it's no longer about I have to have a traditional way to get to something. And so I tell every single one of them every time, you could be the next superintendent. You could be the next chief of human resources. You could be the next chief financial officer. The possibilities are endless as long as you work hard and do the work that is necessary.
absolutely, absolutely. And in a field right now where education is, we need good people. And a lot of folks aren't considering education as a profession for a variety of different reasons. It helps folks see that you don't have to be, education is not just teachers and books and learning all the time. It really is an entire city or entire community of people that make this organization function. And so, moving into, because this is really about with it being Hispanic Heritage Month, tell me what, because I do not want to assume, and we've been talking this month about, the entire diaspora of Hispanic heritage, Latino heritage, how those are not the same thing. And, people have different names and terms for it. So, first of all, I just want to ask if you wouldn't mind sharing what is your cultural identity and how has that impacted your journey?
Yeah, no, thank you for that because that is absolutely true. It's not a one box fits all type of deal. And the way I identify is as a Mexican American, right? And the reason I put the Mexican prior to the American, even though I'm very proud to be a United States citizen and be an American, I am proud of the heritage and knowing that I stand on the shoulders of my great grandparents and grandparents and parents and the people before me, and without them, I would have never had the opportunity to be here talking to you on your show.
Awesome. And so, from that perspective of being a Mexican American, what does Hispanic Heritage Month mean to you?
Yeah, it's a time to be able to celebrate the accomplishments and just be thankful to those that came before us and have established a path for us to be able to do the things we're doing and be successful. And it means that I have to reflect on what I'm doing in my current role in order to continue to lift those up that are coming behind me.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I appreciate that definition because it means different things to different folks. And our understandings of what this Heritage Month and the need to acknowledge our Hispanic heritage and our brethren who have a different experiences. And so, considering those differences, one of the things in the Latino or Hispanic community that has come up several times is all of the different titles and names. So I'm just going to ask you, and I know this might feel a little bit on the fly, but for you, what is the difference between Hispanic, Latino, your delineation of Mexican American, Chicano, and other markers that we have for the racial cultural identity of our brothers and sisters that come from the Hispanic Latino um, heritage?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. It's for me specifically, it's a way of acknowledging the specific roots that I come from, and not watering them down, right? If I say Hispanic, I start watering down that Mexican heritage. If I say Latino, I feel like I'm watering that down. And that's really, or Chicano, right? And that's really the reason why I choose to identify as Mexican American when I'm asked, because for those reasons, I don't want to water down where my family and my roots are from.
I really appreciate you bringing that up because I think in our society today, people feel like, especially in America, they can't be American and. Like for a long time in this country, it was you have to be American, and that's it. Put America first, and it's like, wait a minute, hold on. America's a relatively new country, and it's a country of people who came here, with the exception of our Native American brothers and sisters. It's a country filled with people who came here from all over the world seeking different types of freedom. That whole idea of, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and freedom and justice for all, which we, say all the time. And then we go, but yeah, you don't have the freedom to acknowledge your nationality. It's like, wait a minute, hold on. I have the freedom to be American, but not to acknowledge that I actually have roots in Mexico, and that means something to me. How is this supposed to work? So I appreciate you bringing that up because it really does speak to part of that freedom that we have in America to acknowledge where we came from, and that I'm also proud to be an American and live in the country I live in and experience the freedoms that I do, right?
Absolutely right. I love to be again an American, and I am proud to be an American, and I will say that over and over again. I don't ever want to lose my roots, and that's really what that's about. It's not that I don't respect this country. I obviously have the utmost respect for this country. I think it's the greatest country in the world, and it gives opportunities to individuals where other people don't have. And to your point around this country, it is a country built on immigrants. And to be able to respect that people come from different places, I think is a point that we have to be able to value.
Absolutely. And I think that, if as long as we can continue to make sure that we can have that both and as opposed to one or the other, it leaves people not having to choose. I know as I was coming up, I sometimes felt like I had to choose whether or not, to acknowledge my African American cultural heritage, to acknowledge various parts of my identity. Can I acknowledge I'm a woman? Can I acknowledge being a mother? I'm all these things. I'm not just one. And I feel like sometimes when we are asked or expected to leave part of that behind, which we know is part of the history of this culture, it's making folks have to make a choice between what is near and dear to them, and that's not fair. I just don't feel like it's fair in America to be able to do that. And thinking about fairness, I got to go into this whole idea of working in labor relations and human resources and this idea of working with labor relations, fairness comes up a lot. Equality comes up a lot. And us being in the context of equity, that can always bring up some things. So tell me a little bit about what it's like within your role of having to juggle labor relations and human resources and how you balance all of that out.
Yeah, it's a three chainsaws at a time, if you will. It's a good role and it's a good place to be. And I am fortunate that I have a great team of leaders that report to me that do balance some of that as well. As for me specifically, I meet with our labor partners on a regular basis to discuss different issues and different things that are going on. From the moment I came in, I tried to be an equity centered leader, looking for fairness in how we approach our labor relations, so that we can promote our community and actually help our people out at the end of the day, right? Because when you talk about labor relations, it really is the adult side of the business as well as the human resources side. But how do we make decisions that are going to help our community and through that help our children be better? And that's what the really the North Star and how we operate with my team.
So, as you're doing that, how important is it to foster and build relationships within this context? And how often do cultural differences sometimes get in the way or catalyze those relationships?
Yeah, relationships matter right, in everything we do, and building relationships and being able uh, to bring people along or just understand different perspectives. It's part of being a culturally proficient leader is understanding those perspectives and advocating for the people that aren't in the room, so that they can have representation even though they're not sitting around the table. And so there are times when I'm sitting in the room and I'm not thinking about certain things, right? Just based on my perception and what I'm walking in with, and other people will go ahead and check that. And I give my team full go at checking me when I'm not looking at things in a certain way, because it is important that we have the ability to call each other out and hold each other accountable towards those equitable practices. And when we talk about just the building relationships, if you can build a relationship with somebody of trust, respect, love, and admiration, you're going to be able to move work easier, and you're going to be able to be honest more times than not. And the amount of respect and trust, you'll start believing that it is due to the intent is to get better, right? And to be better. And because of that, you can move together towards better solutions for a system that has not yielded results that we want.
I can't appreciate that enough because you know I've said to you many times that if I were to ever go back, human resources would be where I would go. And the reason is because it's really the nucleus of everything that happens in the district and or in an organization because it's where the people come in, it's where they leave from, it's how we make decisions on working conditions and things like that. And as we talk about relationships, you sit in a very high role as the chief of human resources in the third largest district in the state of California. That's a huge responsibility and a role. And oftentimes, a question I get is how vulnerable should or could we be in order to like build relationships, because relationships require vulnerability. And when you're sitting in a place of having to negotiate, it's like I got to be able to be vulnerable but not show my whole hand, all my cards, and hold some things close to my vest but also be able to give it as well. And so it's this relationship, it becomes this delicate dance because it's not a relationship where you can tell everything that's on your mind and heart, but you also have to be authentic and vulnerable at times. How Tell us a little bit about what that's like, because it's not a friendship, it's not a collegial relation. It's a very different relationship when you're working with bargaining units. Tell me a little bit about what that's like and how you balance, like, I can say this, I can't say that, how am I going to be myself, what self am I going to be, all the things.
It's very true, very true. And so you said something about the chief of human resources in the third largest district in the state of California. First and foremost, I try to enter every space not thinking about that, right? Because if I come into a space thinking in that way, then I have already exalted myself to a point where now I'm going to see people differently. So I try to not think about that in any way. And I try to enter into every conversation as David Chavez. And from an integrity perspective, what would I do? And that's really the way I speak is I have a position of integrity and I talk to that and I'm vulnerable to that integrity that we're trying to discuss and the problem we're trying to change. And I can be fully authentic through that process and doing that and trying to get people to come along alongside with me towards that process. And so, I, fortunately, I've been able to hold to my true authentic self as long as I approach the conversation from a point of integrity. And that's really how I entered the space. It's I entered as David Chavez. This is the integrity I have and what I'm trying to fix, and this is why it's the right thing. And I can be vulnerable around that space. If they try to pull me out of that, I do change the conversation. I do tend to be a little more closed off and probably not share as much. But as long as I'm able to do it again through that, the rock
Through that.
of my being, I feel like I can be completely vulnerable.
And that's where authenticity and being focused and having, I mean, I love the word you use is integrity, and that's the best word. It's not, but I think it's just not just integrity, it's also having certain value characteristics, certain things that are so important to you that you're like, I'm going to rest in and focus on this issue. We're going to stay focused right here. And I think that's a great point for our listeners to really, pull in is you've got to stay focused. You can't be all over the place if you're going to be a courageous leader. You can't jump into being courageous in everything and being integrous in everything. Well, don't get me wrong, we're not going to not be integrous on everything, but you got to be focused. Like, here is the issue we need to deal with. We need to address this issue. And I'm going to tell you everything that is going on with me around that issue and where I'm coming from. And I think that's a really important and critical point for folks to take with you. That being said, though, it doesn't mean everybody's going to get along. Doesn't mean people are going to see it the same way. Doesn't mean that they're going to think it's just as important as you do. They'll be like, yeah, that issue is great, but can we talk about this over here? Trying to, change the subject. Or there could be conflict. Like, yeah, that's an issue that's important to you. I just don't see it the same way. So when folks don't get along from the place that you're in and having just moved through one of kind of it was a pretty large scale negotiation that you all successfully maneuvered. What would you suggest for leaders that are handling conflict within and between folks, especially when you kind of stand on that integrity? How do you handle it when people don't see it the same way or disagree or even are in opposition to something that you're passionate about?
Yeah, I think first of all is you have to listen to people, right? We say a lot when we talk. And so if we listen to people and what they are trying to tell us, what they're telling us, if we were to just listen, that's number one. We got to be able to listen. And through that listening phase, you're going to hear certain areas that they are passionate about, certain areas of foundational agreement or foundational disagreement. And it's about pulling those things that we are common on and the things that we agree on from a common perspective in order to move conversations forward. So it's always bringing it back to some foundational agreement that we have, even though there's full disagreement on the subject, there could be a piece of that we both agree on and start from there and then continue to build up from that point. And that's how you potentially get through the conflict because if we can foundationally agree on one thing, it opens the door to yes, and that then you can build upon.
So brilliant. I mean, I hope y'all are seeing. This is why we needed him here because these little nuggets of brilliance are sometimes the things that get lost when we get passionate and get involved and or we get emotional, especially when you're in labor relations and there can be conflict and you're dealing with people's lives and livelihoods and the balance and then you can get caught up in something whereas it's like all right, let's not get caught up in the conflict. Let's find out where we agree. Let's figure out where we fundamentally are the same, and then we can start to, kind of ripple effect out, if you will, from there. And I think that's a really smart way to approach the work and realize it's not just in labor relations. This is in all kinds of conflicts. Let's find that point of agreement. And especially if you're in a field that is kind of altruistic, like education or health, medicine, or public service, whether it's, firefighters or police officers or nurses, like these are all public service professions where we can have some conflicts, especially in labor relations, but we got to find a point of agreement. I think that's a really critical point that you just made that I'm hoping folks take with them. I'm going to shift gears just a tad bit because what's unique about Fresno Unified, and I don't want to skirt over the fact that, David is extremely humble. He comes in from a place of humility, and it's just kind of written all over him that when you said, like, I don't come in, right, realizing, like, I'm one of the third highest uh, human resources people in the state because it's a large district. Um, but you're one of the interesting and nuanced things about Fresno Unified is that not only in your human resources department do you do labor relations and the typical things with human resources, you also have incorporated professional development and leadership development inside of human resources. Tell me a little bit about how you're making that work because the leadership development sits with you, whereas the content and curriculum development sits in another department. How do you how are you approaching this leadership development piece and why did you want it in human resources?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And the leadership development, classified development, and teacher development are things that we said we wanted under human resources in order to come up with a comprehensive strategy on how we train all of our employees. And if we house it under one unit, we can then have that common language as to the pieces that we want every single individual within Fresno Unified to know. Then there's going to be different
Mm,
pieces based on whether you're a principal versus a department leader or things of that nature. But we have a common thread through the aspects of what we want and the behaviors and the dispositions that we want every single individual in Fresno Unified to have. So that was part of the thought process at first, as well as just being able to partner differently with our human resources department. Education is siloed in a lot of different ways. Fresno Unified
mm-hmm,
is struggles with the same thing, and bringing them in our house has allowed us to then be able to get our resources um, more aligned to be able to create and develop different tools to make better decisions in real time. And so that was kind of
mm.
where we went with the strategy is how do we align all the resources for a common message and to be able to move work differently with data that we didn't have before.
That is so brilliant, especially as you like right now, for those of you who may not know, Fresno Unified is going through a superintendent shift. And so the redeveloping and redefining what it is to be a leader or a classified leader or an educational leader in this space is going to be critical. And it can't, and what I'm hearing you say is that it can't be department specific. This is something that we need to hold centrally to, to our central values and our core values and beliefs and holding it all of that development in one place makes that a bit more able to be streamlined versus this sitting over here and this sitting over there and but what it also does is that what I'm hearing is it also requires a lot of collaboration within and amongst your department members to make sure that happens, that they still get that content knowledge and because you're not there doing the bus driver training, you're not there, but you are doing the leadership pieces of it and the professional development sits within that. But last time I don't know, you probably have all kinds of skills, but last time I checked, you're not masterful in bus driving. Like that's just not, it doesn't mean that you're
I'm
teaching it or
not.
your folks are teaching that. But you do hold that professional learning and that professional development in your space. So I think that's huge, and that's a shift because there aren't many that I know of. I don't know if you know very many, but I don't know many HR departments that house most of the professional learning in their space. So it's just a difference.
Yeah, I've talked to leaders across the country, really, in human resources, and it's not the entirety of the branches. It's if they hold one, they just hold one of them. It's either leadership development or teacher development or classified, but to hold all three under the same branch, that is unusual.
It is, and I'm excited to see how that's going to pan out and work with you and support you in that. And so now we are going to kind of shift because remember, this is leadership where we live, learn, and earn. We've been talking about the job for a minute, but you are also a leader in your community and a leader in your home. And we don't want to just focus on, so much on the leadership skills at work. how do you balance, first of all, because you're a father and a husband, how do you balance leading, this and having such a huge role in such a huge space, and then also being a leader at home? Because if you know David, you know very clearly David runs his household, he runs his situation. But I don't want to say anything disparaging against your wife, because I know she's like, I don't let him tell it. Because she definitely pulls her weight and does and will wreck shop if needed. But how do you balance being a leader at home, at school, in your community with such a huge role that you have in the district?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned my wife, and thank the Lord that I have her to be able to help out with the balancing act, right? And so, um, I'll say it this way, right? From a family perspective, I've been very fortunate, and I continue to stay blessed as a man of faith um, that I have children that are very, very good. They do well. They're self-sufficient. They take care of themselves. So it's a little easier, especially now that they're a little older, right? And so with that, I have a daughter who's 20 years old, a junior in Long Beach State. I have my stepdaughter who is 17 and a senior in high school, and my son who is 17 and also a senior in high school. And again, them being self-sufficient helps a lot, and having the support of my wife. So the household is easy from that perspective, and work-life balance, you mentioned, it is something that I definitely encourage of all of my staff, my leaders, and I try to model it as much as possible, because it is important. You get to a point of diminishing marginal utility, right? If I'm putting in 20 hours a day, after the 12th hour, and I would even argue that after the 10th hour potentially, I am not thinking the same. I'm not going to produce the same level of work. And if I were to go home or with loved ones or whatever it is, that space that you believe is the space where you can recover, re-energize, and be ready to come back the next day, go do that, because the work is still going to be there. And you come back, and potentially with that time to just think differently and be in a different space, you may get some different ideas and solve the problem. It's shifting the perspective of how you're entering a problem that will change how we solve the problem potentially, and being able to step out and just share time with people you love, and in spaces that you're comfortable in, will do that for you. So I again, super fortunate to have the supervisors and the individuals that I have had in my life that have allowed that time for me to be able to process and do work in a way that is beneficial for the district and also for my family. And but yeah, work-life balance is very important, and I would hope if you were to ask my staff, they would say the same thing. And yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, and you embody that. Like, David would be the first one to be like, I got this going on, I got that going on, and I respect that, because one of the things that you know, I know you've heard me say it, my listeners have heard me say it. I believe in actually operationalizing this idea of family first, and this idea of family first means that the job can't be, even though it's usually the first thing we talk about, it's the thing that we bring up, and all that comes with that. I do not want folks to leave here thinking that just because we talk about the job a lot, that that's the main or first thing in our lives. Our families are our why and why we do this. And I just love what you just mentioned about using and utilizing, if you will, our families to rejuvenate us. This should be where you go and get, fed again, not necessarily where you give your depleted source of energy, your, whatever's left after the day. You go ahead and throw it at your family, as opposed to giving them your best and realizing that this is where I get fed. And I think that's a huge transition that after COVID, a lot of folks are realizing, and hopefully folks are seeing it as a healthy part of being a well-rounded leader. And so, with that, I want to bring us to, kind of round all this out because you have shared some nuggets. And if folks haven't been picking up what you're putting down, I'm going to tell you, honey, get a shovel because he is putting down some things some words of wisdom. What pearls for wisdom would you like to share with our listeners? Either within your role as human resources and labor relations. Also, we didn't talk too much about the chief of staff role, but honey, that's a role that many people, especially in education, don't understand. But I've heard stories about what a great chief of staff you were, which ended up preparing you for this role in many cases because of the work with boards and folks that you had to do. But what pearls for wisdom would you like to share with our listeners about leadership and balancing and the different roles that you have played?
Yeah, the very first thing I would tell anybody is hold true to yourself and be authentic to yourself. And it's sometimes there's a story I heard about this girl asking her dad about a car that he had in the garage, and she's like, "Why do you have this car in the garage?" And it's kind of rusty and other things, and it was a like a really nice car, but just over time, some things happened to it, and he took it to a place and they weren't offering them any money, right? And so then he took it to another place, and so the first place offered him $10,000 for the car. He took it to another place and they offered him like $150,000 for the car. And then he turns to his daughter and he goes, "See, honey, you got to understand. Sometimes you are valuable. You're just probably not in the right place, right, for your value." And so that story sticks to me because you have to hold true to yourself and you have to be in the right space. And if you're not being valued in the space you're probably not in the right space, or you're probably not doing the right work, or something's going on. And when you end up in the right space, you will be so fulfilled. I just think about moving over into the chief of human resources role and the difference in the way I am at work versus when I was the chief of staff. And I love being the chief of staff, but it's a completely different passion and fire that I didn't have as a chief of staff. Even though I enjoyed that job and I love that job, it's not like it is now. So it really stick to your integrity. You'll hear me say that over and over again. Do what you love and do it as best as you can. And people will value you for the work that you do if you're in the right space.
Ooh, y'all heard that. That is the powerful pearls for wisdom from Mr. David Chavez, who, like I told y'all, there are some amazing leaders that we have amongst us. And I just want to thank you so much for joining us, for being here today. Y'all, please join me in thanking our guest for being here on the Pearls for Diamond podcast. We hope that we've been able to shed a little bit of light on what it is to be a courageous leader where you live, learn, and earn by dropping just a few pearls of wisdom to help you on your courageous leadership journey. If you like what you're hearing, please like and share with a friend to support bringing more of this work into the space. If you need more tailored or individualized support for your school, district, community group, or business, or you're in need of a keynote speaker for your next event, visit our website, leadershiplegacyconsulting.com, to schedule a discovery call. And if you're exploring your family leadership and being able to balance this work a little bit deeper, you can contact us at familylegacy5.com to learn more about our courses, seminars, retreats, and tours. I am your host, Dr. Shelly, and I thank you for being with us. As always, this work is a labor of love. So if nobody tell you they love you today, know that I love you, I appreciate you, and I want you to go ahead and make this a great day. But if you can't, you better not ruin anybody else's. See y'all next time and have a great rest of your week.